Today, we have an inspiring guest, someone who took a leap into real estate investing in her 20s and never looked back. If you're wondering how to build a resilient business that creates time freedom, this show is for you. I'm Kathy Fettke. Welcome to the RealWealth Show.
You're listening to the RealWealth Show with Kathy Fettke, the real estate investor's resource.
Today, we're bringing on Grace Gudenkauf, the co-author of the book, The Self-Managing Landlord. We're going to talk about how Grace started investing in her 20s, how she built her real estate portfolio, and how she scaled her business to a point where she now has time freedom. Grace, welcome to the RealWealth Show.
Thank you.
So let's go to your origin story. You look really young. So how did you get started in real estate and at what age?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm very lucky that I did get started at a young age. I'm 27 now, but back when I was in college, my boyfriend was a year older and he somehow found bigger pockets and worked for an investor and ended up doing his own flip. So my senior year of college was actually COVID and I was helping him paint a house. And I'm standing there painting, like listening to some BP episodes. And I just remember thinking like, I should do this, but maybe like when I have a job, I'm still in college. And then when I got a job and I remember listening to another episode, just thinking to myself, I could do this. If this person's doing it, I could do it. And that's when I was probably young and stupid enough to think I could take on a big DIY renovation with him, now my fiance. And we did. And that was the start.
Wow. Oh, I love that story. So it was literally just painting a house that got you inspired. I interviewed Henry Washington recently, and he said the same thing. He's like, hey, if these people can do it, I can do it. And why not? So how did that flip go, your first purchase?
Yeah, so it was winter in Iowa. I was 22, making a good engineering salary, working from home because it was COVID, and I had energy. And so we looked at each other and we're like, let's go buy the crappiest place we can buy and let's DIY it because we didn't have the money to pay for a contractor. We bought an $85,000 house, thought we were going to put $23,000 into it and be finished in 3 months. Ended up doubling our budget and doubling the timeline. And I hated every single second of it. But at the end of it, somehow I was like, we should do that again. And it was actually a burr. It was a perfect burr, more than perfect burr. We still have that house today. It rented, it cash flowed so well. And I just remember thinking like, that is so crazy that I own this now with none of my own capital invested. What if I just continue to figure out how to do this without really ever having made much money myself? Because I was only 1 year out of college. And I guess I did.
So how did you fund that first deal? $85,000, I'm sure you didn't have as a college grad.
I did not. I probably had like $10,000 to $15,000 to my name. And thankfully, that first rehab, he funded from the flip that he did. And we only needed about $40,000 because we got a bank loan. And then we were able to pay for the renovations out of pocket. So I did not contribute to that first one. He got all that money back. And then the second one, since we also cashed out like $25,000 after the burr. So then we took that money and did the next one and the next one. Then I learned how to do private money, creative financing, and it just went from there.
Oh, very, very cool. Now, do you think being in Iowa gives you an advantage? Because it'd be pretty tough for me to find an $85,000 house in California.
So, yes. When I started, it never occurred to me that you can invest out of state. I never even heard that term. I just thought you invested where you lived. So the barrier to entry is way lower, which is awesome, especially as somebody who's super young, doesn't have a lot of money. So it's easier to get in the market. On the flip side, I have to have like 30 properties to have the same portfolio value as your one, maybe two property portfolio. So it takes a lot more buying and activity and transacting to maybe make the same money. But then you could also say the risk is way lower because I'm not going to lose $1 million on a deal because I'll never even have $1 million deal.
That's a really good way to look at it. I love that. So what other ways were you able to get the financing that you needed as you scaled? And what's your portfolio like today?
Right now, I have about 30 units. I've done about 15 flips as well. And the way I was able to scale so quickly in about 4 years, do all that in about 4 years was private money lending, sharing what I was doing on social media. I did that from the beginning before I ever even felt like I knew what I was doing. And somehow people loved watching what I was doing. And if you're out there listening, absolutely share, whether it's a newsletter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or maybe an open house at a flip that you do, because your community wants to know what you're doing. And people like, I actually just got a DM today saying, I want to lend to you. Like, what are your terms? But that would never be possible without social media and sharing and being authentic. And then the second thing was learning creative financing. That is so powerful, especially as interest rates are higher right now than they were during COVID when I started. So creative financing and private money are two things that are definitely going to allow you to scale your portfolio like crazy.
Mm. So at what point were you able to leave your W-2 job? And did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to. I always knew growing up that I would own my own business. I just had no idea what. And so when real estate started to come around, I was like, I think this is it. I think this is a way that I could make my own business and a relatively straightforward thing. Like a million other people have done this. I just have to copy what they've done. So about a year into COVID, I was still working remotely. I was supposed to move to California for my job where it was located. And I was about 6 months into real estate. And I just really started to think, oh my gosh, if I move to California, I will not be able to do real estate. I won't even be able to buy a garage out there. Like, this is going to be crazy. Everything I've done so far is going to go poof. So somehow I got crazy enough that after a year of starting my job, I finally said, you know what? I am going to quit. I'm going to do something crazy. I had a $300 mortgage, no pets, no kids, still lived like a broke college kid. So I was like, there's zero risk in me doing this. Worst case scenario, I go back to that massive company and get another job. And I remember when I told my boss, I was so, so, so scared to tell him I was quitting. He thought I was quitting to be a realtor. And I was just like, all right, sure. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Like, he did not understand. And I think he absolutely could not understand that a 22-year-old who works for him owned, like, at that point, 6 or 7 houses.
Wow. Yeah. It's just not in people's consciousness, generally speaking. I remember my mom would say to my dad, we should buy some of these little $70,000 homes in Palo Alto. And he's like, oh, Barbara, that's crazy thinking. And of course, those Palo Alto homes are several $1,000,000 today. It's right smack in the middle of the Silicon Valley. But it takes this mindset shift. And it's amazing that happened to you. I mean, obviously from your boyfriend and from painting a house, but did you read books or go to meetups? I mean, how else were you able to expand your mindset around it?
I've always loved reading, and I started in the personal finance world in college and like went through like a Dave Ramsey phase and started reading a bunch of different books about wealth or self-help or self-development. And so I think that real estate was a natural progression from that. But I was absolutely a sponge when I started because I listened to every podcast. I read all the books. I followed everybody online, read their captions because so many people share so many good things on social media. And I just was learning, learning, learning. And that I think is what made me able to get started and was able to show me, oh my gosh, there's all these other people out here doing it. It's actually not that crazy. And I will say, that's a lot to say from somebody who grew up in small town Iowa, where if you made $100,000, like that's rich. Like
Yeah.
you're rich if you make $100,000.
Yeah, it also makes it a little bit easier for you though, right? Because if you live in California and you have to make 500,000 just to get by, that's a little bit harder to acquire, that much cash flow, at least quickly. But like you said, it's all relative, right? Because the houses you're buying are much smaller.
I agree. And even I went to a conference in LA about a year ago, and I just met so many people it was a pretty small conference. And I met multiple people making crazy amounts of money in crazy different ways, even outside of real estate. And even then, I was 3, 4 years into it, and my mind was just like, whoa, this world is so big. And that's why it's so important to be involved, whether it's meetups online or in person, for, reading books, listening to the podcast, because you just don't know what you don't know. And you've only lived your own life, so you don't know about all these different possibilities. So that's why you got to be a sponge and absorb it all.
100%. For me, it was the RealWealth show, which I started 20 years ago. And I would read all the books of the people I was interviewing just from beginning to end so that I could be good at the interview, but also to learn and just soak it up. We didn't even have podcasts back then. So I just had to create my own. Like, that's how I did it. But I can't emphasize that enough, that learning is the number one step, because once you know, then you can take action. But if you don't know, then it's just scary. Then you're just like walking blind in the dark. All right. So let's talk about management. That it's one thing to buy a property. It's another to fix it up. And it's a whole nother to manage it as a rental. So what have you learned over the years with, what do you say, 30 properties?
Mm-hmm. I learned a ton over the last 4 or 5 years. The first property, my first tenants was actually 4 inherited tenants on 2 duplexes I bought. And I was 22, inheriting people in their 50s, 60s, full grown adults that I have to, kind of boss around a little bit, especially as inherited tenants. Long story short, that can be a little bit more difficult. And I just had to learn right then and there how to stand my ground, create boundaries, be a little bit of an authority. I also learned some hacks. For example, you don't always have to say you're the owner. Don't lie.
Because you were self-managing?
Self-managing.
Oh boy. At what age? To your early 20s?
22. Maybe
Okay.
23. Maybe my math's wrong, about 23.
Yeah.
But
So you had to put on your, I guess they say,
big girl pants.
big girl panties and be a boss.
Exactly. And I just remember walking into some of those apartments and being like, no, this is how we have to do it. And I was compassionate and I always helped my tenants, but I had to be firm. And learning, through getting burned multiple different ways. But yeah, you really have to put on your big girl panties, make some hard decisions, but create boundaries, use a tenant management platform. That's going to help so much with that. But also, if I can do it, anybody out there can probably self-manage.
Yeah, I self-managed in the very beginning, and boundaries, that is so important, especially as a woman. I don't want to say that women have less boundaries, but maybe, maybe just compassionately, people would tell me they were having a rough time and be like, oh, I understand, and let them be late. Even if their kid was just sick at school, it's like, oh, it's okay. So how did you develop those boundaries at such a young age?
Number one is having an actual software that you manage through so that there's like a third party in between you two. So they don't have your cell phone number. They're not calling you at 10 o'clock at night. And one trick I like to use is immediately upon moving in, I have them do a practice maintenance request in the software and a practice message. And then I tell them, this is where you will be communicating, doing maintenance requests, etc. And if I ever get something silly come in over a Saturday, like maybe not silly, but not pressing, what I'll do is Monday morning, I'll say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm just getting to my office to see this. As a reminder, if you do have emergencies over the weekend, call this number. But my hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They don't know that you're not a part of a 15-person team managing 500 rentals. They have no idea. And so reinforcing that I'm not available every single second of every single day, but also I will help you. If there's an emergency, here's what you need to do, is going to go a long way, because otherwise you'll train your tenants to expect an instant response and also ask for everything.
So what kind of softwares then? Did you create your own, or did you find one you like?
Turbo Tenant is great. Tenant Cloud is great. Honestly, as long as it can e-sign leases, accept maintenance requests, do communication, and they can pay rent there, and it's affordable, like less than probably $50 a month, I highly recommend that being the best $50 investment you'll ever spend on your business.
What about finding the tenant? Do those softwares help you with that too?
Yes, they will help you do background and credit checks, and they'll also help you list the property. They'll syndicate your listing to Zillow and apartments.com and all of that. But also, my favorite place to list is just Facebook Marketplace.
Really?
I'm in a smaller area, so Facebook Marketplace is way more used than Zillow, for example.
Interesting. Okay. And then how have you been able to build a team to help you?
Well, when I started, it was just me doing everything. I was the cleaner, the manager, the contractor, albeit the worst contractor ever. And I slowly had to force myself to hire out each thing. Fast forward now, and I'm in Tucson, Arizona. So I manage everything from 1,500 miles away. And that was a huge learning lesson. I decided to start flipping in 2024. So I actually hired a full-time project manager. And I just found him on Indeed.com, paid him a salary to do all of my flips to pay for their salary. But I would say the biggest people on your team, of course, is going to be your realtor, an investor friendly realtor who understands what you're trying to do, and make sure you have a fantastic buy box to give them so you don't waste their time. And then your contractor, you're going to get screwed by a contractor if you're in this business long enough, and I have been. But really vetting a contractor, making sure they can communicate really well, getting word of mouth referrals, and visiting their job site is going to go really far into building out your contracting team.
Absolutely. How do you oversee your contractor? Because even people who've had good contractors, maybe the contractor runs into personal problems or gets lazy. Like, how do you stay on top of it?
The quality control is so hard. And that's what my project manager did. So I'd have contractors and a project manager. We had a very specific system of every week I get photos of the whole property and a video walkthrough. We'd also do final walkthroughs and blue tape the property before final payment. But you bet I learned all those lessons the hard way.
Yeah.
Because I had many, many contractors do terrible work and I was too busy to notice. So I just said, looks good, I'll pay you. And then I go to sell it and everyone's like, why is this so sloppy? So those are a few things that you can do, but you're exactly right. You have to train, your contractor is going to operate on however you train them. So the second you slack off on their quality control, they're going to slack off. But if you're always on them, they will most of the time, if they're a good contractor, meet those expectations, but you train them just like you train tenants.
Yeah. All right. And then are you mainly are you flipping or are you mainly buy and hold, medium term, short term rental? What's your strategy?
The first 3 years, I did only buy and hold through BRRRRs, and I did a lot of midterm rentals. I think I was like the first person in my market, about 150,000 people in my city who ever did midterm rentals. So I had a lot of success with some pretty mediocre MTR setups. And then the rest are long terms. I've never delved into short term rentals. But in 2024, I really started flipping a lot because I realized I wanted to have a lot more active income. And then this year, I'm doing a little bit of development, hoping to keep flipping and then buy less but better deals.
So for the medium term rentals, do you use the same software platforms for finding your tenants and the lease agreements and all that?
I do, but I also had a platform manager, or sorry, it's called a channel manager. I used Hospitable. I actually did hire a co-host for my MTR, so I self-managed my long terms, but I have a co-host for the MTRs. So I'm not sure what they use, but I used for the first 3 years Hospitable, and it just basically synced your main management software like Turbo Tenant with Airbnb to make sure your calendars were talking and you knew where all your guests were staying.
I haven't tried that yet, but I will now. All right. So let's get to your personal life. You're only 27. So you probably don't have a lot to compare it to, but how would you say that real estate has changed your life or improved your life?
Being able to go on trips whenever I want without having to ask for permission, getting my nails done on a random Wednesday afternoon, like I'm about to do after this podcast. And just having the freedom. I think your mind sees you can't see the doors that would open to you when you have a full-time job because you don't have the time and energy. Whereas when you do have the time and energy, there's so many possibilities you never even saw before. And I could never in a million years go back to working for somebody else. I will always pick freedom over making more money. And I think my life has just changed dramatically and realizing, wow, it's been 4 years and I've still provided for myself. This isn't, fate. This isn't, what's the word? A fluke. This isn't a fluke. It's been 4 years. I've provided for myself and people on my team. It's pretty incredible. And I feel very lucky.
Yeah. And you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
So, what advice would you give to other investors like my 25-year-old daughter who's just getting started?
Two things. House hack. It's like a no-brainer, very low risk way to get started in real estate. Live below your means, and also work for an investor. That's the one thing I never did that I wish I would have done. If you're out there thinking you want to do this full time one day, or not even full time, maybe part time, go find somebody who does it and either try to be a part of their team or pitch to them what you could do for them. Don't bombard all these people asking, hey, how can I work for you? But go be a solution for them and learn and earn at the same time. I wish I would have done that. I think it would have been very much worth it.
So good. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on the Real Wealth Show. I know our listeners got a lot of value, and I hope we can have you back again sometime soon.
Thanks, Kathy.
And thank you for joining me here on the Real Wealth Show. If you have not left a review yet and you like this show, please leave a review. We really appreciate it. It helps with our numbers and our ranking and allows more people to find the show and listen to it. So we appreciate it. Just leave a review and subscribe as well. That helps a lot too. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. I'm Kathy Fettke, and this is The Real Wealth Show.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any securities or to make or consider any investment or course of action. For more information, go to realwealthshow.com.